Hey family, this is Drizzy Dre, Mr. One and Only, the man of 1,000 nicknames. Welcome you to In Between the Zone. Make sure that you follow us at the Flex Zone 1 on Instagram and Twitter at the Flex Zone 1, or send an email to theflexzone1@gmail.com, and make sure, most importantly, you subscribe to our YouTube channel by putting in the Flex Zone Podcast. I am the Black American Dream on IG, but today I brought in some guests with me because if I bring these guys in, you already know we're talking about wrestling, the wrestling realm. Take it away, fellas.
So you can find the Wrestling Realm on youtube.com/the Wrestling Realm. Make sure you follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at Wrestling Realm. And then get on iTunes, get on Stitcher, get on Google Play. Last but not least, get on SoundCloud and Podbean. You can find the Wrestling Realm. And then you want to follow me, just go on at Brian H. Waters, all platforms. Check out a podcast brought to you by the Wrestling Realm called Break It Down with Brian H.
And you can find me on Twitter at Dwayne Allen 24.
You got a YouTube channel, Instagram, man?
I don't have a solo thing. He gave everything they were doing, and I gave you my personal Twitter.
These guys are so humble with it. All right. So I brought them along because, like I said, we're talking wrestling, and the question I want to pose out there is, what is the legacy of Vader? This is a guy, his name is Leon Allen White. He's played football for the University of Colorado. He's been on the Los Angeles Rams. There's so much to Vader that meets the eye. But, I want to turn this over to the standard because these guys know wrestling like the encyclopedia. So, take it away, fellas.
Standard? That's a nice compliment. Appreciate that, right?
No problem.
So what is Vader's legacy? When you start from the very beginning of, you say Vader, you have to go further back than anybody probably remembers. I think Vader was one of the biggest stars to have ever hit Japan. In Japan, they've got this mantra of these big monsters that show up in the ring. And to me, Vader was the blueprint for a lot of American superstars in the States that made their way to Japan, whether it's New Japan Pro Wrestling, All Japan Pro Wrestling. Then later on, companies like Wrestle One and Pro Wrestling Noah making appearances. Vader sort of put together a blueprint, right? So that for a lot of guys, if you didn't make it in the States or you had an issue, you could always work in Japan. And I think Vader was in my mind, he was one of the first guys to sort of carve that legacy of American imports in Japan to not only come to Japan, but sort of dominate and offer them a completely new product. With that being said, he ended up finding himself making a name, becoming Vader in Japan. You know what I mean? He became the mastodon. He began to don the mask, and he had this big persona. And you talk about, wrestlers. There's a natural sort of physique and way that most guys work in the ring when it comes to wrestling. That's sort of not a secret, but Vader was a super heavyweight. We're talking about a guy that could move quick, that could punch hard, and was doing moonsaults and things off the top rope. Naturally with that being a huge attraction, of course you're going to attain, interest in the States. He brings that same talent to WCW World Heavyweight Champion. Just made his rounds until he finally found himself into the World Wrestling Federation in the 90s, which is where he affected my life the most. As a kid growing up, seeing Vader, he was always a childhood staple. If you came up in that new generation of 90s professional wrestling, that dawned before the Attitude Era took off, Vader was one of those guys that you saw featured a lot. Whether he was in there with guys like Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, Sting, or British Bulldog, it didn't matter who it was. Vader was a guy that to me was a crossover superstar. He had the appeal of this monster, but he had a character of something that a kid would naturally gravitate towards. And if you don't believe me, he showed up in the mid '90s on Boy Meets World. Boy Meets World was another '90s childhood staple. And he was not just a one-time appearance; he's a recurring character.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually brought that up because it was the episodes with Mr. Feeney when he was going back and forth with Mr. Feeney. But then not only did he have the wrestling character to him, but he also broke character too because you also saw him as an actual person outside of his wrestling character when they had the episode with him and his son, and then he was trying to his son's trying to impress him.
With poetry, and that's what made him so much a huge superstar because he didn't play Vader the wrestler on TV. He played Vader the wrestler and the father of Frankie Stechino. He was Francis Stechino. I think the funniest part about the episode, he's on maybe 3 or 4 episodes, but I think the funniest part, the one I enjoyed the most, was when Feeney stood up to him. He's like, "Get out my face, Feeney! I'm not a kid anymore." He's like, "Oh, hush down, Francis." He's like, "Stop saying my regular name." So it's moments like that have an impact on you. as a child, and it's just only a piece of his legacy. Brian H.
You know, when I think about Vader, I always think about, you brought it up, his agility. He was a big guy. I mean, I grew up watching guys like Andre the Giant, Yokozuna. But I remember when Vader came to WWE, as we were talking, getting ready for the '96 Royal Rumble, and it was a big deal. And he had James E. Cornette as his
out of all people.
Yeah, and you know, James E would get out there and he would say, you know, I got this Mastodon and he's coming out, and I legit thought he was gonna come in and win the Royal Rumble. He was heavily favored. But even though he didn't, he made an immediate impact that night, and that later that summer he was in the main event of SummerSlam with Shawn Michaels. That's a big deal. When you're in the main event, especially the biggest pay-per-view, the second biggest pay-per-view of the year, the biggest party of the summer would later be called. That was a big deal. And, you know, to see him hit that moonsault, and, you know, it was like, he was just great, you know?
I mean, what, the patented Vader bomb, but then, like you said, the Vader salt. I mean, this guy to be at that much of a weight and to be able to do a moonsault, you know, that's something that we haven't seen in wrestling for a guy of that stature to be able to do it. Are there any guys right now that you can think of that fit that mold of what Vader of what the mold that Vader had for Seth?
I think the closest right now today, he may not be as big as Vader, but a guy like Kevin Owens. You look at Kevin Owens, a lot of people speak of his agility, what he's able to do in the ring. He's a bigger guy. He doesn't have the stereotypical physique of what you would consider to be a wrestler or, you know, sports entertainer today. But I think Kevin Owens is one of those guys that you look at him and you see his frame, you say, that's a bigger guy. He's not going to be able to do things, but he does moonsaults. He moves very fast in the ring. He's a quick strike type grappler. So, I mean, Kevin Owens is one of the guys that I see today. But previously, I see a guy that sort of followed in his footsteps was in Tensai or Matt Bloom or Albert. You know, in Japan, he was known as Giant Bernard or Giant Bernardo, you know, in Japanese. He did the same thing. He went over to Japan after a sort of a failed run in the U.S. and he became this huge monster, and he had the same appeal as a Vader. You know what I mean? And, you know, you see other guys like Scott Norton. I feel like in WCW in the mid to late 90s who did the same thing. While working for WCW, he went to Japan. He was an IWGP champion as well. You know, it's one of the most prestigious world titles, you know, globally. And so guys like Scott Norton, guys like Kevin Owens, they've always had a Vader vibe to me because they, including Tensai, because they moved quick in the ring. They were very agile. They sort of redefined what it meant to work as a bigger super heavyweight, rather than just say, okay, you're big, you do the quick strike, the big boot, maybe a choke slam or a big body slam or something, you know, something like that. Those are a few guys that sort of come to mind that were, you know, sort of in my, you know, mind will keep Vader's legacy alive.
One more question I want to ask you guys before we conclude. He played this is a guy who played in a Super Bowl, and so to go from football to wrestling, and you're seeing that with a lot of guys nowadays. What do you think about that transition for him? Is he like the standard bearer for doing that type of transition?
Well, really coming from a Super Bowl and doing it, or just in
general? Just from a football background.
I mean, I can't say that because, to be honest with you, when he was coming up, a lot of the times that was the transition. A lot of, you know, in the early days of wrestling, a lot of guys were football players that transitioned into professional wrestling. We talk about a lot of the guys that came out of West Texas State. You know what I mean? And all the guys that came out of that, the long list of the Funks and DiBiase and stuff like that. A lot of those guys that came out, even guys like, go back to WCW, Goldberg played for the Atlanta Falcons. You got guys like
your boy Baron Corbin.
He played football. That's the crazy part. He was a big dude. Like he played for Baron Corbin. Your favorite guy, by the way, Baron Corbin. You guys like Kevin Green that had his run in WCW. There's a ton of guys that have come and gone. You know, that's even Marcus Corvon or Monty Brown in TNA. He played for the Buffalo Bills. I think he played on both those teams that flopped in the Super Bowl. And came to WWE and part of WWE ECW's brand. So I think it's a seamless transition, but I mean, I think he just followed in the footsteps of the guys that came, you know, before him. You know, he was another one of those guys that recognized that football was going to take a toll on you after a while, and they decided to go into wrestling. I don't get it personally, but you know, it's nothing new. You know what I mean? And I think when he did it, it was pretty much, you know, sort of the standard. Either you were a bodybuilder, a weightlifter, or a football player. And a lot of times when your career was over or you couldn't move or nobody wanted you, start training for some wrestling.
Well, guys, this is it. On the other side of this break, we want to get into our next question, and that's wrestling comparisons. Who in today's generation would you compare to the generation previous and say those two guys were the best at what they did? This is In Between the Zone. Stay tuned. Hey y'all, this is Drizzy Dre, the man of 1,000 nicknames, but I'm here to make sure that y'all subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you just put in the Flex Zone podcast, we'll pop right up on Facebook, the Flex Zone, Instagram, and Twitter at the Flex Zone 1. And right now, I'm tossing it over to my brothers. The Wrestling Realm is in the building.
Yes, sir. Well, guess what? Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/The Wrestling Realm, where you can find all of our shows and you can find my podcast each and every week. Break It Down with Brian H. Also, follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And guess what? Subscribe to us on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, Google Play, and SoundCloud.
Man, that's a lot. I mean,
I don't think I know.
Hey, you got to go to where the people at. You know, the people like the podcast, but whether they're Android person or they're Apple person, we got them covered.
Okay.
There you have it.
Well, when you get the Wrestling Realm and the Flex Zone together, it is always too sweet. And welcome back to In Between the Zone. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Flex Zone Podcast. If you put that in, our channel will come right up. Go like our Facebook page, the Flex Zone. Wrestling Realm is in the building, y'all. What's your guys' social media?
At Wrestling Realm, at Brian H. Waters.
At Dwayne Allen 24.
All right. We talked about Vader on our first part. Now the second part, we want to talk about wrestling comparisons and generations. In the NBA, you have LeBron and Jordan. In the NFL, you have Montana and Brady. But in WWE and all of professional wrestling, we always have these type of comparisons. And the first one that comes to my mind is Hogan and Austin. Is that a fair comparison to you guys?
I'm going to say Hogan and Cena.
Okay.
About you?
Dwayne looks like he doesn't agree with Hogan Cena.
I'm conflicted. I don't know about that.
Okay.
Because I look at it like this. I think it's okay to compare Hogan and Austin, first and foremost. I do, because I think you had one guy that sort of transcended the business, and you had another guy that transcended the business. By the way, Austin did break all of Hogan's records and everything. Attendance, merchandise, everything. By the way.
Which he loves reminding me of.
But I think so. I think that's one of the biggest ones, because you look at what Hogan did for the entire industry. I'm talking crossover appeal, in the ring, pay-per-view buys, how people even watch the product. It became not so much a great product, but it became something fun for the kids. It became very marketable and very easy to license, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like Austin did the same thing at the turn of the era when things kind of got gritty in the late 90s. And, you have the Monday Night Wars and the Attitude Era where a lot of things were coming up. And you think about the times in, I guess, maybe, say, 98, early 2001, where things were changing. The MTV generation was really, on a different level. Music videos, TV shows, reality TV shows. I mean, I think America became very distant from how things used to be, but and very acceptable to the Austin way. But I think he changed the game. I think Austin and Hogan is a fair comparison.
Well, I wouldn't say Austin. I mean, I can never discredit anything Stone Cold Steve Austin did. Mm-hmm. But when I always say Hogan and Cena is because I look at Hogan, who obviously put wrestling on the map mainstream. I mean, you're talking WrestleMania, the Rock and Wrestling era, like that's all Hogan. The first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9 WrestleManias, he was the headliner. 9 is controversial, definitely 8. But then you also look at John Cena. And was he going 10 years strong, constantly on top. You look at what he was able to do from, I call it the forgettable period of wrestling, into the next sort of the boom period, but also in the social media world where in a time and day where everybody got some sort of dirt. He's kind of like LeBron James in that standpoint where, Cena probably obviously he has more dirt than LeBron James if you want to get into that type of stuff. But for him to be able to go out there to make all these make-a-wishes, that's why I put him. And then, like I said, longevity. As great as Stone Cold was, you're only talking 3 years. Now, granted, those were 3 very impactful years. But you're talking 98, 99, 2000. I skipped 2000, 2001. 3 impactful years. But for me, it's always going to be John Cena and Hulk Hogan.
I don't agree. I don't.
The next one that comes to mind, AJ Styles and Shawn Michaels.
Absolutely. That's what?
You're talking favorites here.
Oh man, that's my 1A favorite and my 1A current favorite from the past of all time, and then my current guy now. Yeah, AJ Styles is on another level. Mind you, the guy just turned 40. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and what he's been able to accomplish in a very short time. You look at a guy like John Cena, who was probably sort of the standard bearer, carrying the brand as much as he has over the years, as Brian just alluded to, talking about his legacy so far. AJ has come in and has done so much of those things already. I mean, we're talking crossover appeal. When you can appeal to children, that means you can make money for the company. And not only does that outside the ring, he does the same thing inside the ring. What he does inside the ring is always compared to Shawn Michaels because of his in-ring ability to work with everybody. His agility to do high-flying moves, but still work a match with legitimate psychology and really put on the show.
I can't even disagree with that. As much as I would love to say, you know, Shawn Michaels and Daniel Bryan, or even Shawn Michaels and John Cena. When you're talking, what I'm hearing is like the two guys who were able to put on a great show in the ring and had that crossover appeal. I gotta go with AJ Styles and Shawn Michaels.
I mean, I can't disagree because you know how much I love both guys. So.
Perfect comparison. I don't see the problem whatsoever.
Can we get one match between them?
No. Shawn Michaels has to grow that ponytail back out. I'm not doing bald head Shawn Michaels. No.
I mean, they had a shot for it, but Michaels turned it down.
But see, now that he's actually interested in doing it, it's like, why'd you wait this late? Because, you know, he's in tremendous shape, by the way. He works at the performance center. He's there every day working out, but...
So now he is interested?
Well, see, they were teasing about the fact, like, oh, maybe he might be interested for one more match. I'm like, why'd you cut your hair then?
I thought he was saying on Table for Three that he wasn't interested in doing it because he said he would feel like he would cheat the fans right now.
Yeah, but then recently he's been saying, like, there's been rumors going around, like, maybe he's interested in showing up maybe one more time. And you just hearsay.
When you hit the gym,
he's working with the young guys. He's in the gym every day. Like, dude's got abs for the first time in his life at 40-something years old. He's like, I think I can still do this, but, you know.
Nah, we don't want to see it. If Shawn, like he doesn't have the hair.
No, he cut his hair. It's not worth it.
The last one I have is Rock Cena. To me, that's more comparable than Cena Hogan.
Oh.
Because right now you have The Rock right now with his Hollywood career. The fact of what he's been able to do in wrestling, and then you have John Cena with his mic skills and his transition now into Hollywood. I mean, he did have the one movie. It's not coming to me right now.
The Marine, not the Marine.
No, not the Marine. I think the Miz took him over for the Marine.
Yeah, well, yeah. But I think I agree with you, Dre. Once again, I think it's a fair comparison because of like I said, one, Hogan and Austin was doing boom periods. There was no boom period for John Cena. But like you said, with the comparison of being a standard bearer and then transitioning into Hollywood and different sets. I mean, John Cena, he's already been a new Transformer, the Bumblebee prequel to Transformer. You know what I mean? So I'm just like, I mean, Hollywood's been calling because he has that action star appeal, but at the same time, he's that friendly guy next door thing. And that's how The Rock was. I think a lot of people, they liked what The Rock had to give because he was a big, muscular guy, action hero, but he also had a softer side that could sort of be as versatile as he wanted to in Hollywood. And I think Cena's following that same path.
I mean, I agree. I think that's definitely a fair comparison. When I think about it, I see this is the reason why we got that match at WrestleMania 28 and WrestleMania 29. It was the reason why that match was for the WWE Championship because Rock and John Cena, and they were just like two icons. And like you said, crossover appeal for Hollywood. I would even say there was a reason why we had Hogan Rock. You know, as much as we wanted to see Hogan Austin, egos aside, The Rock was just too hot in 2000. From 2000 to 2002, you could make an argument that The Rock was a bigger star for the WWE. And that's the reason why I think that worked. But Rock and Cena is definitely a great comparison. And, you know, it's interesting to see now John Cena kind of understanding why The Rock did things the way that he did them as far as being a part-timer.
And by the way, the movie was Blockers.
Oh, yes, he did. Yes, yeah. The parents trying to. I'm not gonna get into that. I don't know what the rating is for your show, so I'm not gonna that subject. Yeah,
hey, I mean that's better than the name I thought about, so I'm actually glad.
Well, I'm glad you looked it up. I definitely because.
Is there any other comparisons that I'm missing that you guys are thinking about? There's people out there. There's The Undertaker. Right now you have what?
I'm going off.
Don't wait, time out. What are you about to say with Undertaker? Who are you going to compare to the Undertaker?
No, I mean, there's nobody compared to the Undertaker. I'm just throwing out names right now.
I don't know. I think you pretty much named all the major ones. And for the reasons that you named them, really stand out. I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I know with the time we got, we can't really divulge into it the way we probably would usually do. But I don't know. I can't think of anything.
I'm gonna just put one out there.
And it better be a good one, yo.
Trish Stratus, Alexa Bliss.
No.
Why not? Why not?
No.
Why not?
No, because Trish Stratus was a sex symbol that could not wrestle. She was a manager.
Okay.
And she ended up turning into a women's wrestling icon. As in, she's probably considered the greatest of all time, outside of Mae Young and the Fabulous Moolah, with all due respect. But I thought you were going to say Mandy Rose.
Well, I think it's too soon. I can't compare that yet because I don't know where Mandy Rose
she's pretty.
is going.
Not necessarily considered a wrestler.
Alexa Bliss, pretty.
No.
She wasn't, when she came in as a manager, I know she wasn't like the typical bodybuilder. We'll save that for later.
I see what
get into that right now.
I see where Brian is going because like you started off and you said that Trish was a manager who couldn't wrestle, and then she turned out to be arguably the greatest female wrestler of all time. Champion. Alexa Bliss right now, it was questionable at first when she hit the mainstream roster,
right?
Because a lot of people were like, okay, this is just another pretty face, but then her mic skills against Becky Lynch, and then now you see her as a multiple-time champion, both from the SmackDown and the Raw roster, who's able to carry the division.
Okay, I mean that does make a lot of sense. I would see it. I saw a little bit of an older comparison was like maybe China to like Beth Phoenix.
Okay.
Two muscular women that didn't work very shy. Like they've had matches with men and they really focused on that. They were bigger women.
Rumble.
Both of them was in, the Rumble, and I think that's probably one of the older comparisons that I can think of. But I mean, I'm sure there's a ton that we, because easy to dive into. We'll probably spend like 4 hours when this is all said and done discussing it, like we usually do stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But those are, the ones you brought up are probably the ones that everybody talks about the most. And how great is AJ Styles, by the way? Like, he's getting comparisons to the greatest in-ring performer of all time in Shawn Michaels. I'm just saying, guys like Seth Rollins he'll claim, I'm the best guy since Shawn Michaels and stuff like that. But AJ Styles is really showing you the way everybody's looking like. So I just had to plug AJ Styles one more time. You have to forgive me.
Well, speaking of plugs, plug the Wrestling Realm one more time.
Take it away.
Well, you can follow us at Wrestling Realm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Wrestling Realm. And we're on Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and SoundCloud.
All right. And the Flex Zone, subscribe to our YouTube channel by putting the Flex Zone podcast, like our Facebook page, The Flex Zone, Instagram, and Twitter at the Flex Zone 1. If you have any questions, ideas, or possibly want to be a guest, send email to theflexzone1@gmail.com. I am your boy Drizzy Dre, the man of 1,000 nicknames, and we gone. Peace.